more than to be in a group of women entrepreneurs, because I think entrepreneurship and business is just so exciting. I think it's our time. You know, if you look at what's going on in the world, no offense, but I think the men have kind of screwed it up. And I think it's time for us to come in and fix it. And so I'm really happy to be here. And my passion is to help people accomplish their work and enjoy their lives. I spoke a couple weeks ago, or not even, it's been a week ago, for the Morrisville Chamber of Commerce. And I said that, and a woman came up to me and she had tears running down her face. And she said, I had made the comment, it makes me very sad when I hear somebody say, I have to go to work. I believe God intended us to work, but I also believe He intended us to enjoy it, at least most of the time. Two of my consultants are here, Lara and Amy, and I've told them 80% of the time what you're doing, you should be willing to do whether you got paid or not. 20% of the time, well, you know what happens 20% of the time. But if it's more than that, then it's time. And this woman said to me, I realized I got in the car this morning and I said to myself, I hate going to work. And that's really sad. I don't think it should be that way. And so I'm just passionate about helping people figure out how they can do what they were born to do. I've set a goal that I want to give a speech when I'm 100. George Burns one time said he couldn't die because he booked an engagement at the Palladium, and he said, I can't die because I have to give this performance. He didn't make it quite to 100. I think he made it to 96. But that's what I really want to do. I just had my 72nd birthday, and I've never felt better in my life and been more excited about what I'm doing, and I like to help other people as well. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity. So how many of you have heard about or maybe even seen the new Netflix show, The Magic of Tidying Up? Anybody seen it? How many of you have heard of it? Well, Marie Kondo has this book, which has just sold millions. And frankly, you know, she's talking about things I talked about 40 years ago. And so people say, you know, well, how do you feel about that? I said, it's just confirmation that I was right. And that's true, because when I started the business, I started in New York, and then I went to Washington, D.C., and I called the editor of the Washingtonian magazine. And I said, I've just moved here from New York. I have a service that I think would be of interest to your readers. And she liked the idea. We talked for 45 minutes, and they did a little story that said for $10 an hour, you could get Barbara Hemphill to come to your house and organize your filing system. And I went to the Small Business Administration to ask them to help me grow this business. And there were two gentlemen over the age of 60 who looked at me and said, you're crazy. Nobody pays for organizing closets and cupboards and kitchens. Well, guess what? Right now, the latest statistics I saw were that residential organizing alone is an $11 billion industry. One of the phrases that Marie Kondo uses all the time, she asks the question is, does it spark joy? And her premise is, if it doesn't spark joy, you don't need it. I think that's a little strict myself. There's a lot of things in my house that don't spark joy, but I'm still not ready to get rid of them. I have a different version of it, and my version of it is, does this help you accomplish your work or enjoy your life? By definition, if something doesn't help you accomplish your work or enjoy your life, it is clutter. Now, the interesting thing is, you know, a lot of times people are afraid to have organizers come in because they think that we're going to tell them what to do. We don't have that right. We don't have that ability. I use what I call the cost factor, which is you can keep everything you want if you're willing to pay the price. The price is time, space, money, and energy. So my job is not to say, you don't need to keep this. My job is to say, this is what it's going to cost you in time, space, money, and energy. So now you decide. Years ago, there was a designer who used to say, have nothing which you do not know to be useful or beautiful. Henry Morris was his name. And I added to it, or love. Have nothing in your home which you do not know to be useful, think to be beautiful, or love. I said that one time. It was a huge audience, several hundred people. And a woman on the front row said, well, there goes my whole house and my husband. At this point in life, I started with closets and cupboards and kitchens, and I quickly found out that paper was the #1 organizing challenge. It's still pretty challenging. Let me ask you a question. How many of you work in a paperless office? Look at that. And here the interesting thing is, most of us never really learned to manage paper either. And so then we thought, well, we don't have to because we're going to go digital. And so all we've done is created a bigger and faster mess. And I spoke with someone yesterday who owns an IT company. He's owned it for 34 years. And he said something that I wrote about 20 years ago. He said, you cannot continue to keep everything. At some point, it's going to blow up. And I said, you're an IT person, so I said, would you please write for me 7 bullets about the things that you need to do to prevent that from happening in your office, and then I'll write an article about it, because those 2 things are really important. My whole business has been based on 4 words. Clutter is postponed decisions. I learned that from clothes closets. Clothes closets fill up because we haven't decided whether we're going to lose the 10 pounds we need to lose to get back into that paper skirt again. And then there's that exercise equipment. It looks so good on Home Shopping Network. We won't even count how long it's been. And then there's the candlesticks you got from Aunt Sally. Oh, you just love Aunt Sally, but the candlesticks are not really your style. But if she came for Thanksgiving dinner, wouldn't she be happy if they were on the table, assuming you could find them? Yeah. Then the same thing's true of paper. You come home from work or come out of your office and there's papers on the counter. You can't cook because the kids have dumped their school papers and your husband's dumped his papers, and there's the mail. And you say, okay, I've had it. Today's the day I'm going to clean this up. And you pick up the first piece of paper and look at it and think of any number of reasons why today is not a good day to deal with this piece of paper, and you put it over here. And you pick up the second and the third and the fourth, and before you know it, the pile that was on this side is on this side, and it's like, oh, goodness gracious, I got to get dinner on the table because we got to go to a meeting. Then there's email. Open, close, open, close, open, close, and 45 minutes have gone by and nothing has happened except your spirits have kind of sunk because you realize how far behind you are. Clutter is postponed decisions. Recently, I had a client who said she had hired 3 organizers in 2 different states and paid almost $10,000, and she was more disorganized than ever before. So she wasn't going to hire me because she thought it was really hopeless. And I said, well, why don't you try it? I said, I'll guarantee it. If it doesn't work, and I've guaranteed my work. I said, people pay me. When people hire us, they don't pay us for our time. They pay us for a solution. If it isn't a solution, I don't want your money. So we went to work, and our first session was 4 hours, and she was very happy. And at the end of the session, I said, so tell me, what was different about what we did from what you did previously? And she said, well, first of all, you taught me that my problem is making decisions. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I do. I don't make the decisions for you. I ask the questions to facilitate. But she said the other thing was, you didn't tell me what I should do. You asked me what I was willing to do. There's a new book out by James Clear called Atomic Bullets. It's the best time management book I've ever read. I highly recommend it. And he says in the book that your success does not rise to your goals. It falls to your systems. Mm-hmm. And that is so true. Think about anything in your life that you have to do repeatedly. You need to have a system. So let me give you kind of a funny example about this. What I love about what I do is you never know what a new day is going to bring. Sunday evening, I got an email from NBC Channel 17 saying, could you do an interview tomorrow morning on how to maintain productivity in the workplace during March Madness? My husband said, what are you? I don't know anything about basketball. Except that my family's all big Tar Heel fans, so it's like, okay, I know what the event is about, I just don't know anything about it. He said, what are you going to talk about? I said, one of the things I've learned is that when you have a chance to do the media, you never turn it down. I always think about, who was it? I forget, some famous person that I was on the platform with, and I know it was, no I don't, anyway. He said, you can ask anything you want and I'll answer anything I want. Because I've learned with the media, you go in saying, what is it I want to communicate? And then whatever they ask, you kind of answer it enough to be respectful, but did you know? And then you just twist it around. I love it. So I never miss the opportunity. So we were going to go to the City Club. I was supposed to do this interview at 8:30 on Monday morning. I was all dressed up and ready to go. Walking out the door, and I got a text saying, sorry, we have to postpone, which just happens all the time, no big deal. So then a couple days, but I was really glad because it gave me a chance to think about that because I thought it was really important. So I thought, what would be important to say? Well, I talk about systems. And by the way, I use the acronym for system of saving you space, time, energy, and money. I love that acronym. That came from the consultant that I trained out of South Africa. He gave me that and said I could use it, and I just love it. Usually I don't like acronyms because they seem contrived, but isn't that true? I don't care what it is that you're doing. If you have a system in place, it will save you space, time, energy, and money. Well, it's for anything you do repeatedly. Well, March Madness happens every year. So I suggested that this was a good time. My passion is helping people accomplish their work and enjoy their lives. So we're talking about people accomplishing their work during March Madness, but also enjoying their lives. So it's like, okay, it's too late to put a system in place for this year, but it is the perfect time to be thinking about how you put a system in place for next year. It's the same thing true of taxes, okay? It's too late to get everything in order for taxes this year. You're going to scramble and do whatever you have to. But it's the perfect time to say, okay, what system do I need to put in place now so that when I'm doing taxes for 2019, I don't have all this chaos? One of the other principles we teach at Productive Environment Institute is together we're better. So I suggested that with the March Madness thing, if it's a small company, everybody in the company should sit down and talk about it. Okay, let's look at the reality. You're interested in it. How can we do this? What can we do together? How can we make it work? And in a larger company, pull out a team and brainstorm about how it is that you're going to do it. But here's the really interesting thing. There's a study done by the United States Government of Labor Statistics. They surveyed 2,000 people. The average number of hours of actual work done by an employee every day is 3 hours. So March Madness doesn't really have to make that much difference if you have a system in place. There's another interesting statistic that says for every 5 employees you hire, only 4 are doing what they're paid to do because the 5th one is looking for something in order to do what they're paid to do. And every time that's true, it's because there isn't a system where there ought to be. So we've identified what we call the 7 information management questions that every company should answer, and every family for that matter. What information do we need to keep? In what form? For how long? Who's responsible for filing it? Who needs access to it? How do we find it? And how is it backed up? Every single time an employee can't find what they need, it's because one of those 7 questions has not been addressed. So my passion now, we talk about spark Marie Kondo saying spark joy at home. I think we should spark joy in the workplace. And one of the ways we will do this is by putting systems in place so that people can accomplish their work and enjoy their lives at the same time. You have on your table a handout. And this handout, and by the way, one thing I forgot that I meant to bring was I wanted to bring an index card because I wanted to offer you something. And if you've got a piece of paper, or you can write it on the handout and give it to me. About 20 some years ago, Stephen Covey was here right after the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anybody hear that speech? He was over in Meredith College, brought him over. And I'll never forget, he stood up at the front of the room and he said, okay, before I begin, I want you to write down the name of the person to whom you are going to teach what you're learning today. That was so powerful because when you are listening with the idea you're going to teach somebody else, you hear it very differently. Well, one of the things I like to do is if you're going to be sitting here listening to me for 30 minutes, I want you to go back with some specific action you're going to take. And research shows you are 67.6% more likely to accomplish a goal if you have an accountability partner. So I usually hand out index cards and I have you write on it what is one thing you're going to do, by what date, and how do you best like to be communicated with? Email, text, phone, whatever. And give it to me or somebody else in the room, and we'll be your accountability partner. I guarantee you that will make your investment in being here take you a long ways in terms of accomplishing your work and enjoying your life. So at the top of your handout, there's 4 questions. These 4 questions I use over and over again. People often ask the question, well, where do I start, or how do I know if something is organized? When you hear organized, what do you think of? If something's organized, what comes to your mind? Give me some feedback.
It's neat. Everything is.
Neat, okay. Everything in its place, okay. What else? Yes? Efficient. Efficient?
Easy to find. You can find it.
Easy to find it. Yep.
Kim Louie.
What? Your ability to accomplish any task or goal is directly related to your ability to find what you need when you need it. Now, we often think, and we do hear, a place for everything and everything in its place. That has done us a huge disservice. It's half right. It is extremely important that everything has a place. Is everything going to be in its place? Probably not, because we live in a messy world. So I've often said, people think that I'm naturally organized. People who've been around me for a long time, Laura and Amy, know that's not true. I'm not naturally. I have ADHD, I have dyslexia, I love to start things, I don't like to finish things, I like the big picture and I don't like the details. So the reason my systems work so well is because they were developed for people like me. And I was in Dan Sullivan's strategic coach program for 8 years, and he's taught like 25,000 entrepreneurs, and he said he thinks 80% of them have ADHD. And we certainly live in an ADHD world. We live in a world where stuff is just being bombarded at us all the time. So these 4 questions are to help you identify whether something is organized. Does it work? The first thing, whatever that system is, does it work? The second one is, do you like it? Sometimes a system works, but you don't like it. A good example would be, I had it wasn't even a client, I was at a movie production house in Charlotte. I actually went there because I got to be a fill-in for the movie, The Ultimate Gift. And I walked by the office of the CFO, and he said, oh, I know what you do. He said, I'd like to have a clean desk, but every time I have a clean desk, I can't find anything. Well, I ultimately developed a relationship with him, and we did go back and organize his office. And the interesting thing is, when I looked at his office, I didn't look at it and say, oh, that looks like a disorganized office. He had piles, but I could envision that it was a pile per project or whatever, and it looked like it was okay to me. But he didn't like it. The third question is, does it work for the other people it impacts? Which is very important. Oftentimes, people in companies think, well, this is my stuff, it doesn't affect anybody else. It does. And when you work for a company, when you have employees, it's important that your employees do it in such a way that they don't show up for work tomorrow. You know what to do, because some terrible things can happen if you don't. I had a client in Washington, D.C. 30 some years ago. It was an accounting firm, or not an accounting firm, it was a firm, and the accountant in the firm dropped dead. It was a very small business. The person who was doing the accounting dropped dead, and nobody knew what he was doing. And there were some things that should have happened that didn't happen. As a result, the company ended up declaring bankruptcy. So it's really important how what you do impacts other people. And that's true in our families as well, in our relationships. Oftentimes our clutter really hurts our relationships. And so it takes compromise. One of the biggest issues in organization is the difficulty in letting go. How many of you know somebody whose life is really paralyzed by their clutter? All of us know somebody like that. Well, one of the things that I've learned is that when people have difficulty letting go of things, it is inevitably because of a severe emotional loss. I was autographing books in Barnes & Noble in New York City, and I made that comment. And there was a young man, probably in his late 20s, came up, tears in his eyes, and he said, "My apartment is so full of paper, I haven't had anybody in it for months, not even my family." And he said, "I come home from work at night, and I say, okay, tonight's the night I'm going to clean this up." And he said, "I become physically paralyzed." He said, I sort of my bed because that's kind of the only flat spot. And he said, sometimes I can barely crawl in my bed because of the stuff. He said, "Are you telling me that I have to deal with the grief of losing my mother before I can deal with the paper?" I said, "Well, I'm not a mental health professional. I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you for sure from my experience is that if you find someone you trust, probably not a family member, that will help you go through that to decide what you really want and need to keep, it will help." I told that story at Clemson University. I was doing a presentation, and a woman walked up and she said, "Well, you just saved my marriage." I said, "Wow, that's pretty dramatic. What do you mean?" And she said, "I came to this conference with the idea that I was going to go back and tell my husband, to whom I've been married for 13 years, that I was leaving. Because he's a pack rat, and the house is all full of stuff, and I can't dust it, and it makes me sneeze, and it makes me sick." And then she stopped and she said, "I never realized before that it wasn't that he wouldn't get rid of it, but that he couldn't get rid of it. His mother died when he was 7. I said, "May I make a suggestion?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Go home and say something to him of the effect of, I never understood before how important all of this is to you. Let's figure out how to keep it." I stayed in touch with him for 8 months. It made a huge difference, because suddenly what happens to us is in relationships, we say, "You don't need that," and the other one hangs on, "You don't need that," and it gets worse and worse. And finally he felt heard, and then he began to say, "Oh, well, we could take a picture of this, and then I could get rid of it." And we began to make some progress. So that third question is, how does it impact others, and understanding where the emotion is coming from. It's very easy. People often say, I can organize somebody else's papers, but I can't do my own. That's easy to understand. You don't have their emotions. You can look at those papers and say, you don't need that. But when we look at papers, our papers represent our hopes, our dreams, our intentions, our fears. And so it's like it's too much to deal with, so we just shove it off to the side. Then the last question is, can you recover quickly? Messes happen. So a place for everything? Yes. Everything in this place? Probably not. If you came into my home or my office unannounced, you might look around and say, oh, and they pay you money for organizing. In fact, a couple of years ago, I had a client, it was a couple, And they were going to come to my house. It was on Saturday. I don't usually do that, but they worked, and that was the only time they could come. And Friday evening, my husband left his glasses at the gym, and he had to go back and get them, and he really didn't want to. And I said, oh, I got some errands to run. I'll go pick them up, and I'll do some other things. Well, in true ADHD style, I thought, oh, well, I'm here. I'll do this at the same time. And I was listening to music and running around, and my phone rings, and it's my client saying, we're almost at your house. Uh-oh. So they walked in, and I said, look at your watch. And I said, I'm going to show you how this system works, because it looked pretty messy. 23 minutes later, maybe 27 minutes later, everything was put away. And it was put away in the right place. So can you recover quickly? And quickly is by your definition. We had a client recently that we did, one of our most popular services is called a total office transformation. It's 8 hours, and we put systems in place. And I did it for this client, and I checked in a few weeks later, and he said, well, you know, I still have more clutter than I want. And we talked about it, and I said there are two things here. One is you have to figure out what level of clutter you're willing to tolerate. And everybody's level's different. Mine is 1 week worth. So for me in my office, Friday afternoon is when I want it clean, because I want, even though I might come in and work on Saturday, I never work on Sunday, but I might work on Saturday, but I want the office to be okay. So that's my level. And then the other one is, what do you need to do? The client said, you didn't tell me what to do, you asked me what I would do, what I was willing to do. Well, I learned this from my own story. I used to think that because I was an organizing consultant, that when I went to bed at night, everything should be neat and clean. So I'd be cleaning up the kitchen, putting away the dishes, and my husband's sitting in his big chair watching TV, and I'm mad as a skunk. And one night I just said, I'm going to bed. Just leaving the stuff. I got up the next morning, and I plugged in the coffee pot, and as the coffee was brewing, I walked around and I started picking up things. And I realized, I really don't mind doing this in the morning. Changed everything for me. So I said to this client, first is what's the level you're willing to tolerate? Some clients want it cleaned every day. Some clients want it cleaned every week. Some clients want it cleaned once a month. So first, that's the level. And then the next one is, what will you do to make that happen? If there's something you say you want, but you don't do it, it means you don't want it badly enough. That means the why isn't big enough. If the why is big enough, there's always a way to get to it. And that's where we come in. We help you figure out what you will do. First of all, why you're doing it. Organizing in and of itself has no value. It's simply a skill to help you accomplish your work and enjoy your life. And then it's like, okay, once we know what that is. So the question we often ask is, what's one thing? And this is a question I ask you to seriously consider. What is one thing that has to happen in your life for you to be happy with your progress? One thing. And then you put a system in place to begin to make that happen. So those are the 4 questions to identify whether or not it's organized. Then if you decide, okay, I'm not happy, I'm answering no to one of those 4 questions, then I want to get it organized. So on your handout, you see what we call the 5-step productive environment process. We use this over and over and over to solve every problem that you can imagine, from women coming to me and saying, I'm miserable in my job, but I don't have any idea what I want to do. So state your vision is, I would like to accomplish my work and enjoy my life, and I don't know how to do that. All the way down to, I'm tired of the clutter on the kitchen sink, and I want to clean it up. Or I'm tired of the way my handbag doesn't work. Just tell you a story about that. I bought a Brighton bag. It was brown leather, just gorgeous, you know. But it had all these pockets on it. And I could never find my keys because I couldn't remember which pocket I put it in. And I started to give it away, and I thought, wait a minute. I went and got the super glue. I glued some of the pockets shut. It works perfectly. ways to get organized. You know? So our 5-step process, one client called me recently and said, our family just used this process to plan our family vacation. So it starts with state your vision. If this were true, what would you be able to do that you can't do now? How would you know? What would you feel like? Making it real. The second one is to identify your obstacles. So what's preventing you from doing that? What have you tried that didn't work? What are you afraid of? What might prevent you from succeeding? Or what don't you have that you need? Progress starts with the truth. That's another one of our principles. So if your why is big enough, then we've got to start by saying, okay, what could stop you? And all of you who are coaches know that's true. If you're a health coach or you're a physical coach, any kind of coach, you know that that's what you have to do. Then the third one is commit your resources. Who can help you? How much time? One of the first questions we ask clients is, how much time and how much money are you willing to spend, and how quickly do you want this done? Years ago, I got a call from a woman, and she said, this was back when I was doing residential organizing. She said, can you come this weekend and work all weekend long? And back then I'd do anything because I wanted to keep food on the table. And so I said, sure. Well, the reason was her house was incredibly disorganized and she had a new boyfriend. And she went to see him and his house was all white and neat. And he was coming and she said, I can't let this happen. So she had me to come in, and so we got it all organized. We spent a long time, got it all organized. And then it ultimately deteriorated. And years later, when we talked about it, it was because she was a writer, but she wasn't very prolific in her writing, and she used her disorganization as an excuse. So the fact that she might get organized would then take away that excuse. And so she sabotaged herself. And it took her many years, but she finally realized what she'd done. That goes back to the emotions of organizing. She realized what she'd done. One of the other things we ask in terms of resources is, are you a self-starter? On your handout at the bottom, there's a link to an online program that can help you create what we call a finding system as opposed to a filing system. And if you're a self-starter, it'll work like the charm. But if you know you're the kind of person that buys an online program and never looks at it, which would be me, I mean, I don't do that. If I buy an online program, I have the best of intentions, but unless I have an accountability partner, nothing is going to happen because I will find something else that's more important, or I'll even forget I have it. I've spent money on programs that I bought and then I forgot. I was like, oh, yeah. So now I know that if I buy a program, it has to come with a coach because otherwise I won't do it. Then we come to step 4, which is the most important one, which is design and execute your plan. That's 80% of it. But you can't do that if you haven't done the other 3 things first. And then we come to the 5th one, which is the most important and the one where most people fail, and that is sustain your success. How many times do things work right the first time? They just don't very often. And so we absolutely give up. And when we do that, we lose a whole lot because we don't learn from what didn't work. And if we learn that, we can go back. And going forward, whatever that goal is, everything that you say, think, or feel about that vision is one of those 5 things. Maybe if you're not able to sustain your success, maybe the vision has changed a little. For example, one of the things I know with all business owners, the number 1 challenge to having a profitable business is to narrow your market. And it is, hands down, the most difficult thing to do. Number 1, because we're women and we have trouble saying no. We want to help everybody. And besides, what we do is so good, it's good for everybody. However, that's not good for a profitable, sustainable business. And it is the hardest thing to do. So organizing is about getting focused on what you are doing. And so often your vision has to change. I keep changing my market. I've reinvented myself many times and will continue to do that. That's why I'm happier today doing it than I was 40 years ago, because I've changed, I've grown, and I've kept bringing it up to the next level. And now my next goal is, I'll let you hold me accountable, I want to do a TED Talk called The Economics of Clutter. Woo! Yay! Because clutter is costing our world enormous amounts of money. Not just the physical and the digital clutter, but the clutter within systems, whole industries, whole disciplines doing things that simply do not make sense. They do not work. I got a check in the mail recently from my insurance company for 4 cents. Yeah. Now, I know legally they have to do that because that's what the law says. That's crazy. That's insane. Or my husband came home from rotator cuff surgery with 24 oxycodone. He never took one. So what does that leave? That leaves the clutter of 24 oxycodone that I have to figure out some way to responsibly get rid of, which is why the price of drugs is so high in the first place, because a whole bunch is being given, and it's why there's so much drug addiction. That's clutter in whole systems, and it's costing us billions and billions of dollars. So that's where I want to go next. Stay tuned and see what happens. So there's your 5 steps. I'll give you a very simple way that I applied it. When I moved into our house in Johnston County, kind of getting settled, and I was thinking about laundry. I hate doing laundry. Anybody here hate doing laundry? Yeah. And I thought about it, and I thought, you know, Barbara, you're going to have to do laundry for the rest of your life. Are you going to have this fight with yourself about it all the time? You know, like I'd procrastinate and think, oh, I need to do it. No, I can wait until tomorrow. And then suddenly I wanted to wear something, and what I wanted to wear was in the laundry basket. Say, okay, this is ridiculous. So I thought, okay, I'm going to apply my 5-step process. So state your vision. I decided that my vision for laundry was that once a week, 100% or at least 97% of it would be clean, folded, and put away. That's the vision for laundry. So obstacles. Well, first of all, it's boring. I don't like to do it. It hurts my back when I fold clothes. I'm a procrastinator, so I'm really not sure when to do it, so I kind of procrastinate about it. So that's a problem. Then resources. I thought, well, I have a laundry room, but it's really too small to fold clothes in. I have a king-size bed in the master bedroom that's the perfect height for folding. And there's a TV in there, which means I can record some things that I don't necessarily have to watch, but I can listen to. That means I can fold clothes while I'm listening, so I'm not bored. And my husband and I are not very social people. We might go out on Friday night or Saturday night, but the chances that we go out on both are probably next to nothing. So I decided that Friday and Saturday night was my laundry night. I've been doing that for 20 years. I don't even think about it anymore. It's just, and if I'm going to be out Friday and Saturday, then I usually do it on Thursday because I want to come back to it folded. I don't want to have to come back with all the clothes from the trip and all the clothes as well. And it's worked perfectly. Or another example is water the plants. You know, it drives me crazy when I go into a business and there's a plant that looks sick. It's like, really? Don't you think that sick-looking plant says to the world, well, if you take care of your plants that way, what does that say about how you're going to take care of me? So if you can't take care of it, get rid of it. So I decided, I love plants, and they're very healthy, they're good for you and all that, but I'm not a green thumb person. I said, okay, here's my system. I'm going to water them on Monday with a little bit of Miracle-Gro. If it takes more maintenance than that, they're not my plant. And so I have some violets. Violets, I guess, like the light, because all I do is water them once a week. I don't even water them the way they say you're supposed to water them. I just water them at the top. They're beautiful. They're blooming right now, and they're just gorgeous. And I have several things in there. So one of the tools that we recommend for a lot of people, not everybody, is something we call a Swift file. It's an old-fashioned tickler file, 1 through 31 in the 12 months of the year? Well, there's one that I was hired to be a spokesperson for the company, and I fell in love with the product and I bought it. And so now we sell them. It's called Swift File, and it's a date file. So I took a piece of recycled paper and I wrote on it water plants, and I stuck it in on Monday. And on Monday, I watered the plants, and then I'd look at my calendar to be sure I was going to be in town the next Monday. And if I'm not going to be there Monday, but I'm going to be back on Tuesday, it's like, okay, I'll give them a little extra and they'll make it. Or I can hand the piece of paper to somebody else and say, well, you water the plants while I'm gone. And that's how I did it. I mean, I had to do that a long time. And now and we also had a clock that had to be wound, old-fashioned clock. So Monday morning was water the plants and wind the clock. And I've been doing it for 20 years. It's another example of a system so that you don't even have to think about it anymore. The last thing I have on your handout is those 4 questions again, but I've added the word still. Does it still work? Do I still like it? Does it still work for the people it impacts? And can I still recover quickly? And if the answer is no, then it means it's time to go back to the 5 steps and adapt it again. So I've given you here a formula for how you can organize anything in your life or in your work, and at the office as well. And my prayer is that you will give serious consideration to your own business and how you can spark joy in your work so that people are able to accomplish their work and enjoy their lives. All right. Questions? We have time for questions and answers? Okay. I love Q&A, so. Yes?
Hi, I'm so sorry I was late. I didn't get a chance to hear your introduction. How long have you been in business helping people's lives like this?
41 years. Yes, that's right. Yes?
Do you find the older generation more difficult to work with in the helping them come to a point where they can let go? My dad's 91, and he would just prefer that we just leave it.
And you should, and you really should. As a culture, we are really at a crisis point as it relates to physical things, because my generation, and even some slightly younger than I, have spent our whole lives collecting things that we wanted our children and our grandchildren to have, and our children and our grandchildren do not want them. And part of the reason they don't want them is because they've seen what having all that stuff does to us. And unfortunately, again, this is something that I would write about in the economics of clutter. Part of the issue are the big discount stores. You walk in and you can buy 6 jars of spaghetti sauce, and they're a really good price, and so you buy them, and then they end up sitting up on your shelf. And in fact, I talked to the director of development of Dorcas Ministries this week, and she said that 40% of the canned goods that are donated to Dorcas Ministries are expired and have to be thrown away. There is an example of the economics of clutter, because that means that the volunteers and staff are taking enormous amounts of time to process that, and then they have to pay to get rid of it. And so that's where we have to teach people to be intentional about something. So my suggestion was, if you ask yourself, does this help me accomplish my work and enjoy my life? And you say no, then you say, could it help somebody else accomplish their work and enjoy their lives? And if it's dirty or broken or out of date, the answer is no, and the responsible thing to do is to throw it away. And anyway, in the case, so we have an elderly generation now that is in a great deal of pain because it kind of questions what they were about, what their life was about. And so I really say, you don't try to force you can never force anybody to get organized. Never. Yes?
Would you say that I'm a social worker, I'm obviously working a lot of mental health, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious now from a research background too, as far as where you are with clutter, hoarding, organizing, would you say that it's generational in terms of older, younger, or it's mixed?
No,
I'd love
it's-
to know where that bears.
No, I don't, you know, people have often asked me too, is it male, female, and I don't see, I mean, I've worked with all of them and I see it everywhere. What I do know that it is all related to emotional. It's all because, and part of the thing, the reason well, let me read you something from Less Clutter, More Life. This is my favorite page in this book. It's what stops us. I never have enough time. I have too much to do. I have better things to do. Organizing is boring. It's too difficult. It never lasts. It's never good enough. I often overthink the situation. I didn't create it. I have no idea what is there. I'm easily distracted and go off on tangents. I get stuck in the memories of the past. It's too emotionally draining. I want to be responsible and respectful of the things I've been given. When I sell books and I autograph them, I do not put the person's name on it unless they request it. Because what I learned was when I would organize people's offices, they'd have autographed books and they were really done with it, but they felt disrespectful giving it away. So I just autograph it with my name, which means when the buyer's done with it, they can pass it on. A friend of mine says, over-responsibility becomes irresponsibility. I have to take care of other people and other things in my life first. It's hard to admit I have an issue, and I'm afraid to let something go. I might want it back. Those are the things. Any other questions? Well, I hope that you can take this and identify something in your life, something little or big that you'd like to change, and that you will test this out as seeing it as a way. And if you know somebody that's looking for a career, if you hear a woman, they're generally women, we have a couple of men in our program, but they're mostly women who are unhappy in their work and they've thought about being a consultant, but they weren't quite sure how to do it, we'd love to talk to them because we love to help people accomplish their work and enjoy their lives. Thank you very much.